Hello there. Okay, so if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll see that I've done a variety of different drawing and painting videos. Quite a few people have been asking questions about the app that I use to create my artwork. So I thought I'd do a video, a tutorial about the app Procreate on the iPad and give you a rundown of the kind of features of the app and the way that I actually use it. I've been using Procreate for about 2 years now exclusively. I used to do my digital paintings on Photoshop on a desktop with a graphics tablet, but I've made the transition and 100% of my work is done on the iPad now. Now obviously I have an iPad Pro and Apple Pencil, and it's really moved that along and put it onto the next level and raised it up another gear. So I'm going to show you how I have become familiar with Procreate and the knowledge that I've gained over the last 2 years. Obviously the app has developed and there are different versions, and I'll be showing you some things that are new to this version of Procreate, and some features are exclusive to the iPad Pro as well. So as you can see, this is an example of one of my full paintings, and I really don't feel that there's anything that is unachievable on the iPad these days. A lot of people say that Photoshop is better, Wacom, Cintiqs are better, but to be honest, I think if you're an artist with a strong enough vision of what you want to achieve, then the iPad and the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil are really good tools to achieve that now. Like I've already stated, I'm going to go through as many of the features as I can think of with Procreate. I'm also going to create a bit of a shortcut to the different sections within the video. So if you look in the video description below, you will find jump off points. So if you want to know about a specific area and a function within Procreate, then please feel free to look through the description and just click to those particular points. Having said that, if you want to sit through the whole journey, please be my guest to sit through all the descriptions, especially if you're new to Procreate and you've never used it before. I'm hoping that this video will be a really useful sort of overview and actually, make you understand a little bit more about the app itself. So first things first, obviously you need to open up the app. If you go back to the gallery, I'll start from scratch. You will, when you download the app, start with something that looks approximately like this. Now there will be some examples, pieces of artwork in there. These are obviously all my individual paintings, but you will start with some example canvases that have already been created for you. So before we even get to creating a canvas, it's important perhaps to mention how you can manage folders and your paintings themselves. So as you can see here, I do kind of shuffle things around a little bit. Primarily my main paintings are there on display. Having said that, I do have certain folders with different categories in those. So once you have a selection of images in here, you can manage them in different ways. So if you slide to the left, you'll see that you have different options. You can delete, duplicate and share. Obviously if you click share, it gives you the format categories, so you can choose it as the Pro. That means the Procreate, like the full version of whatever file or image you've created, so it will be complete with all the different layers. You can send it as a Photoshop layer, or just a JPEG or a PNG. Another way of achieving the same thing is to slide to the right. You'll see it's highlighted it in blue, and now if you look at the top left, you can there's the symbol for sharing and there's the symbol for deleting. Now you might see here that I've got a folder that's got a couple of canvases in there. If I want to add another picture to that, then I can simply hold it and it will select it, and then I can drag it into that folder. If I want to take it back out of that folder, I can simply go into it by tapping into it, hold it, go to the top of the screen, and you can see it's disappeared from there, and it has actually placed it back where it started. If you decide that a couple of your canvases or maybe need to be grouped together in a folder like I've created here, you can simply tap on one, hold it, place it over the top of the other, drop it in. You can see it's put both of those two canvases now into another folder. If you want to create a name for the folder that you've just created, or indeed the actual painting itself, you can just tap on there, and I might just call it work in progress. Okay, tap out of it, and now you can see it's saved as that, so you can access it like that, and then the top arrow there gets you back out of that folder. Just like I showed you before, you can delete, share, so that will work for the entire folder, just as it would do for individual pieces too. If you want to rearrange the images that are on screen, what you need to do is just press and hold until it selects it, and then you can see you can push it in around and actually change the order of things, so that you can give certain things easier, quicker access and more of a priority at the top of the screen. Okay, so when it comes to actually creating a canvas, you'll see at the top right there is a little plus symbol. So the first thing to do is tap on that. Now there are 3 different ways that you can create a canvas there, as you can see. Now if you've copied something, obviously it'll appear in clipboard and you can paste it in as a new canvas. You can click image, and then you can select one of your images from your folders. I don't want to do that. You can custom create a canvas, so if you know you want it to be a certain amount of pixels, width and height, then you can do that yourself manually. But the majority of the time I tend to stick with a preset. As you can see here, there's various different preset sizes. So you can see list, you've got an A4, 180 pixels, 4K resolution or a square, and it gives you the sort of pixel size here. So for example, on the A4 one, it's 3508 by 2480. The definition, the amount of pixels on the canvas restricts perhaps how many layers you can actually manipulate and create for that actual image. Now, having said that, all of these different sizes, that's a massive amount of layers that you'd be able to manage within one image. So at any of these preset sizes, that you've got plenty of scope there to manipulate your image with loads of different layers. So for example, if you wanted something kind of like a widescreen, you could just click on the 1080, and then it's just like the format of a kind of widescreen TV, which might be really useful, especially if you're wanting to display your work on TV monitors or have it play on a YouTube video. Then that's a really nice size to do that with. Now, to start with, I'm just going to give you an overall feel for what all the different tools are on here. Now, there's not much to look at. It's quite a minimal interface, and I think it's a very good thing and a very deliberate thing on Procreate's part, really. I don't really want a too cluttered kind of screen. It's not a massive surface to use. The iPad Pro is a lot better than the smaller iPad, certainly. But even so, even at this size, I wouldn't necessarily want a full Photoshop-like program to start cluttering up large parts of the canvas. So I think that the minimal interface is really useful. But I've just give you a rundown of some of the things around the screen here before I get into any more detail. So if you notice this slider on the right hand side, it changes the brush opacity, and that means the strength of the ink, or the paint or the pencil mark. So if I just find something that's a little clearer, perhaps I'll go into airbrushing. I do tend to use the airbrush quite a lot. So you can see I can change the opacity. I can have it quite strong, or I can have it quite faint. This changes the brush size. At the top here, you'll see this. If you click on it, you can select the different colours. I'll go into more detail later. This allows you to manipulate the layers. This is the eraser tool. This is a smudge tool, and this is the actual drawing tool. Now, across this side of the interface, there is a selection tool. So if you create something, for example, and I create something there, if I click on that, then it will surround whatever's on that layer, and then I can manipulate it. Okay. This one is a different way of selecting, so I might draw around something. This one is a way of adjusting, adding effects and changing colour, things like this. And then this one is about the general sort of settings and overall settings of the app itself. Another thing to add here, once you've done something, once you've actually manipulated something on screen, then you have a undo and a redo. Now, it just does seem to change position on the screen here. I'm not always entirely sure why it seems to do that, but it does seem to do that. So you can cancel things with a cross or undo. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to undo all of the actions that I've just done. Now, once you're in the canvas, at any point, if you want to go back to the folders and the gallery, then you see at the top there, it just says gallery, and you tap on that, and it will return you back to the page with all your artwork. And you can see it does give priority to your latest picture, and it puts it top left there. Okay, so the probably the most important place to start when talking about the different tools is the actual drawing tools itself. Now if you notice at the top it's got a little symbol for a paintbrush. Click on that, you can look through all the different types of brushes and pencils and different things that you can actually use. Now there's quite a long list of things and you can even add your own. We'll get to that later. We start with the sketching tools, so that obviously that is pencils and pastels and chalk and crayons. I don't tend to use many of these, to be honest. I will tend to use the HB pencil. I will just show you there. I'm not using the Apple Pencil at this stage in the video. I will do a separate section in which I explain how that functions and how that works. So clearly I'm not going to have any pressure sensitivity here. Having said that, when you go within each of any of these different types, and you see if you click on it, it turns blue. If you click again, you will get to a section where you can change all the different features. Now there's loads of different things that you can actually change. Now you'll see here it's selected to pencil and it gives you the pressure options and the tilt options. I'm not going to talk about these yet, so I'll just concentrate on the others because obviously they don't relate to the finger use or other styluses. So you'll notice here it says stroke. Now spacing, you know, when you adjust these things it will actually show you visually there what effect it will actually have. So if we have it as no spacing there, you won't notice any difference. But if you change it so the spacing is quite high, I mean you can probably barely see there now, but it's created sort of a series of dots, so all the marks are quite spaced apart from each other, literally. You can also change, if I move that back so you can see it more clearly, you can change the jitter, so it just agitates the marks there, and if I make a mark you can see that it's, you know, I mean I'm not too sure about some of the effects and some of the points of some of it. If you wanted that kind of effect, you might be better to use some of the oil pastel or soft pastel or bonobo chalk to create that effect, but you know, it's another option. So I'm going to turn the jitter down and the spacing on 0. You can also have a tapering of the stroke. You know, see on the illustration there what that actually does. Now I'll see if I can show you on here. You can see it starts faint and it gets darker as it goes along. Okay, so that's the effect that basically it does. So if you wanted to turn that down, so it doesn't have any tapering at the start, you can have tapering at the end. And you can see it starts with a dark line. I'll just clear the screen, in fact. So if I just clear that layer, I'll start again. You can see that it sort of tapers at the end there. If you didn't want it to do that, you can have it so that, in theory, it does that less. To be honest, it's not particularly noticeable on here, but that's what it's supposed to do. So the taper, if you turn the opacity down, yeah, there's a noticeable difference, maybe, it's arguable, and size. Again, on a tool like the pencil, maybe it's less noticeable. In fact, I'll pick a different tool and we just see if we can get that effect a little bit more clearly across. Okay, so you can see there with the pastel. So if we go into there, we've got all the same kind of settings, so you can do the spacing, which looks kind of vaguely ridiculous when it's all a series of dots like that, but that might be the effect that you want. So you can have the jitter, and you can see the kind of effect that it creates there. Zoom out. Okay. You can have it tapering off. Let's change the brush down. You just have to experiment really with some of these tools, but basically you can see it's fainter at the start and gets darker at the end. So you just have to play around. It does give you a really useful visualizer there at the top, so you're not working blind. You know, you can see there the change as they move the slider at the top. So you can just experiment with those and see what effect you like the most, really. If you really might be a useful one if you want to change the size at the end. You know, it definitely creates different features and different effects, and they might be really useful and interesting for you as an artist. So as I pointed out before, there's just so many different things that you can do and different ways that you can manipulate it. All I can really say about it, without going through every single type of mark making and all the different adjustments that you can do to it, is just to try things really. Obviously with a tool like Procreate and any material really, you know, you just have to experiment, see what happens, and see what works for you best, really. So you've got different types of grain you can change there. So you can see it's almost made it like an oil paint there, really. It's created this kind of smooth version. Dynamics, well, you just have to, there's no point me going through every single feature here. It's less relevant than other aspects of the drawing devices. So if I just give you a rundown of some of the other different tools that you can use. So you've got technical pens, studio pens, they're all different kind of inks, which create, a very different kind of effect than the pencil. It's not got a grain to it. Painting is really interesting. You've got all sorts of different brushes. So you might have a flat kind of wet brush that smudges and creates a really nice kind of texture, or you might have a flat brush. There you can see. Now you can see the cursor there probably quite clearly. It is possible to turn that off so that you don't see that, but it's currently set on. You can actually see the shape that it will be using to create the mark. You've got another category, artistic ones. So you've got all sorts of different acrylic, watercolour, oil paint, fresco. Airbrushing, I prefer airbrushing personally. I tend to put it on a medium brush. I'm yet to really grapple and come to terms with the different textures, and maybe that's something I'll do in time, but personally I don't. You've got different textures, so you can probably see here, you can create different patterns. If I just change the colour, you can see patterns that it creates. There's all sorts of different textures there. So next you would have, and moving along here, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on each one of these, but you can see that you get all sorts of different effects. You've got some abstract shapes, some different charcoals, different elements. This could be quite useful. So you've got a kind of water texture here, which might be quite handy if you wanted to create that kind of effect. Driven snow, crystals, clouds. Again, explore these, try the different effects, see what works for you. Personally, I don't know how often I'm going to be using these. It may be occasionally that one or two would be useful, but as a whole, I tend to be quite a traditional painter and drawer. And so, textures, I quite like to draw some of the textures by hand. I sometimes will drop in a kind of photographic texture as a layer and subdue it slightly and have it appearing in areas. But when it comes to the actual brushes, personally, it's not my thing to use a lot of these. But basically, you can explore them. Like I said, you can manipulate all the different features of them. Just like I showed you with the pencil, it applies to every single brush type at your disposal. If you wanted to create a new type of brush, that is something that you are able to do. All you have to do is you click on the plus symbol, so you go, well, you can do it from anywhere, as you can see there actually. So you click on the plus symbol. If you have a shape or a set of brushes that you want to import, you can do so, and it's asking you where you want to import it from. If you want to, select a shape, it may be you have a photograph of a particular shape in your photos or wherever you've kept it that you want to put in there. And likewise for a kind of grain. I don't really feel that's totally necessary. I think I've got an awful lot of options just within the brushes that Procreate actually provides. Okay, so that covers, roughly the kind of brushes that you can use. There are more things that you can do within them that are here, but roughly speaking, I've covered the basics. So let's look at the next tool. You've got a smudge tool there. Now, just like the pencil tool, you can adjust it. You can change the brush size and the opacity, and if you click on it, you can again change all the similar kind of features. So if you wanted to have a brush tool that had the same kind of effect as a pencil, sounds a little bit of a strange thing, but you can do that. So now you've selected a smudge that will actually create a texture as well. So I'll give you an indication of how you might use that. So you change the, you can actually see within the little visualizer there, I don't know whether you can make it out on camera, but you can see the texture that's within there. So if I go into airbrushing, which is very smooth, and then I go back to here, and when I adjust it there, now you can see it's a very smooth visualization. So I'll show you the smooth one first. We'll turn the opacity up to full, turn the brush size down a little bit. I'm going to zoom into an area just to show you the effects of the smudge tool really useful sometimes. And if you wanted to do it just subtly, you'd turn the opacity down, you know, and you'd have to do it a lot of times to have any effects at all. And if you're not so confident about what you want to do, that could be really useful. If you are more confident, you really want to obliterate an image, you really want to smudge the heck out of it, then you can do so. But like I say, you can choose all the different textures, all the same brushes for the smudge tool itself. It is a really useful tool. I think sometimes if you're used to perhaps doing like an oil painting, that's something you're used to be able to do with a brush. So really trying to smooth layers together, create different effects. If you wanted to smooth the edge of something, the smudge tool is really useful. Another aspect in which it's really useful is to turn the opacity to full. And if you've got something you really want to extend, and it could be a pencil line or a particular area, you can just simply, without having to select any colours or anything else, you can just take what's there. So for example, if you had a different colour, if you had a colour here and you wanted to extend that with the brush, but you also wanted to capture both the colours that are next to each other, you can turn the opacity to full and you can see it will select, I'll show you more clearly here, it will select both of those colours. And likewise, if we wanted to drag it this way, it would select both of those colours and extend them all the way across the screen there. I found that a really useful technique, especially if you're just wanting to extend what you've already done off towards the edge of the canvas and fill in a space quickly. Really useful. The eraser tool is exactly the same kind of set of preferences that you can adjust with the pencil, or the mark making tools on the smudge. So you can go through all the different types of texture that you might want to use. So if I mean, it's a slightly bizarre way to use an eraser, but you could do it like this. Some people may have use for it in this way, but I'll just show you. I don't think I ever would, but you can see that it erases in that manner. Okay. The normal way in which I would use an eraser typically is to put it on something like a soft brush, turn the size down, maybe turn the opacity down a little bit, so that with a series of, you know, marks or gestures, I'm going to gradually rub it out. I'm used to using pencil and rubber essentially, so anything that feels most like a pencil, a razor, I do prefer that effect. And the next tool up here at your disposal is the layers. Now the layers are incredibly useful. It's one of the main advantages, apart from being able to undo what your mistakes on digital obviously, one of the other main advantages is to be able to create new layers. So if you see there, I just clicked on the plus symbol at the top of layers and it creating new layers. You can create an awful lot of layers on the new version of Procreate, especially on the iPad Pro. It's obviously a much more powerful device, so it can handle many more layers at once, but you know, you can still manipulate quite a lot of layers on the normal iPad. Now you can see what I'm doing there. I'm actually sliding it to the left and it gives you a series of options. So I was just deleting them, but you can duplicate a layer, you can copy it, or you can select it. I've not actually put anything on those layers, so I'll delete it for now. So if on this layer, I'm just going to show you some different effects. So if I pick something that's going to stand out as being notably different, so if I go for a bright kind of red colour, choose my brush, I might do some airbrushing this time with a medium brush, turn it up a little bit, turn the opacity up. Now I'm working on this layer and it really does stand out. Having said that, I might decide I've done something horribly wrong. I mean, certainly would do if this is what I was creating. Or you might want to put it into the background. You know, all these layers you can shuffle around simply by holding it, and you can see there it reacts once you've held it, and then you can move it up and it gives a different priority to the different layers. So if I decide I don't like that layer anymore, I can delete it, and I've not ruined the entire picture at any point. All I've done is have to get rid of the one layer. So what I tend to do when I'm working is I'll get it to a certain stage like I might have here, then I'll pick a different layer, continue working, and when I'm happy with the additions that I've added, then all you have to do to merge those two layers is to pinch them together. Now it's quite fiddly to do that, but you can see that what I've just done. So I'll stop doing it. If you grab them and pinch them together, it merges both those two layers together. Now I didn't have anything on that layer, it was an empty layer, so if I just add something to this layer, okay, I might decide to put that in the background like I did before. So I'll tap and hold, move it behind. So lower down the scale, the further behind it goes. And now I want to merge them together, so pinch them together like that. Okay. Another really useful thing here is the background. Now you can choose to not have the background visible at all there, simply by clicking the dot on this side of it. You can get rid of any kind of background at all, which, you know, is okay to a point, but then, you know, you do have to look at a background because you've got the kind of checkered, grayed out background there affecting the look of the picture. So rather than doing that, I'll keep the background selected, and by tapping on it, you can select here and you can see the effects. You can select the color background that you want, and you can choose any color, grays, dark or light. If you want to have a different type of color here, you can move the color slider and select different types of color backgrounds. So as I showed you before, if you wanted to choose another layer, create an effect here, maybe create another layer, choose another color, and create more lines here. Just to demonstrate the point I was making before, you can shuffle them around, create your own order, and you'll see maybe like a ghost. Because there's so much information on top of it, you'll only see a faint version of it behind. Another feature that can be sometimes really interesting if you want to build up the impact of a certain layer. So for example, if you wanted to duplicate it, I don't know whether you'll notice now, but I'll certainly notice when I deselect it. In fact, I might just do another version, so I'll duplicate it again and I'll merge that so there'll be double strength. If I make it invisible by tapping that button there, you'll see that if I zoom in, it gets stronger when you double up the layers. Okay, so sometimes you're happy with a detail on a layer, but you just want it to have a bit more oomph and show up a bit more clearly, so you can duplicate the layers and then you can merge them together and it's a bit more vibrant and stronger than it was originally. Okay, within the layers there's also another really useful thing that you can do. Now if you notice when you slide it over to the left, you can delete the layer, duplicate, copy and select. But you'll also notice on the little symbol there you've got an N for normal, but you can choose to do different effects here. So you could decide to multiply the effects of that image, or do a linear burn or a color burn, or you can click back to normal. On the lighten, you can lighten that whole image, screen it, add, I've got color dodge. You know, I mean, occasionally these kind of things are useful. Sometimes you've created the look that you want without any of these features, but it's useful to see the impact of them. Worth looking through to see. Sometimes you just get a surprising effect that perhaps you would not have thought of, and that can be really quite interesting. I do sometimes add a lens flare. Now if I go onto the lens flare layer, if I can find it, yeah. So this is the lens flare layer. Now I've actually changed it at this part, and now I've gone onto the lighten and I've gone to screen. If I click onto normal, you can see that the effect of the lens flare effect that I've put on there is, it didn't look right really. The colours were too saturated, they stood out. I don't want any dark colours to be on there, so for that particular layer, to lighten it and clicking on screen created exactly the right kind of effect. It just, add it as a light source rather than adding all the colour. So you can see there with the layers you get all sorts of different effects. Really quite useful at times, but still the majority of the time it's not necessarily something that I would use. Now the next really key feature, one of the main features, is the colour options. Obviously there are two different colour kind of styles. I've got it on the classic version. I will actually show you briefly. If you go onto the settings. It's got a kind of wrench or a spanner. If you go on here and go on the preferences, it does have an option here for classic colour picker, or if you want to deselect that, now it has the kind of modern, the updated version. I do prefer the classic one personally, because I think that's the one I experienced first, and so I'm used to that one. So I'll keep it there. So simply to select the colour that you want, you'll notice that the colour that is selected is indicated at the top there. If you move this around, you'll see, if I try and do this two-handed, you'll see that the colour you were previously on is on the left-hand side there, and the colour that you're about to change it to is on the right. It's really useful if you want to make a subtle change in colour. Oops, I just tapped it there. If you want to make a subtle change in colour, you can't always tell that with your eye without it there to compare to. So you can see now it's slightly greyer on the right-hand side, and you wouldn't be able to tell that unless it had something to compare it to. So that's really useful sometimes. So you can see now I left it like that. So now if I go back into it, you can see that it's now changed the current selector. So now if I want to go back to a lighter version, the newer version appears on the right. So it's really useful. You can select any different sort of lighter or darker or really rich tone, really saturated and really dark, or really washed out, really sort of greyed out, light and dark here by moving around. I mean, it's quite straightforward really. To change the actual colour, you can move this slider and it gives you a visualization there of the different colours. Again, you can change the saturation with the slider. So as well as visually looking at it there, the slider gives you a very much more exacting kind of slide across from a low saturation at that sort of darkness, if you like. So I guess it's a way of doing it much more accurately. If the only thing you wanted to change was the saturation of colour, then it's a way of pinpointing just that. And likewise, this only changes it up and down on the kind of vertical axis. So it goes from dark to a lighter version of that saturation. So it might be really useful. If you notice the top left here, it's something I don't use, but if you know in a really kind of mathematical sense the exact sort of colours that you require there, you can actually punch it in a numerical sense. That's really not the way that I operate, not the way I think, so I don't do that. Something I do tend to use sometimes is the colour palettes. Now you see here it says new. If you go onto here, it gives you a list of all your different colour palettes that you might have previously used. So if I create a new one there, you can see it's created a new palette. Now if you tap on it, you can choose to give it a name. So I'll just put demo here just for demonstration purposes, obviously. So now we've created a new palette. So if I click on this palette, it's already ticked to it in fact. So if I go back, it's on the demo palette. So if I have found a particular colour that I like here, or another way that you can do this is to perhaps go onto the image and maybe you've created a colour here that's a combination of the overlaying colours, and it might be that particular kind of purple you like. All you need to do is hold your finger down for a period of time, which you can actually adjust, and you'll see at the top there it's now selected that colour. Now just like on the other thing I showed you, the previous colour that you had selected is the colour on the bottom half of that circle. Okay, so that is the new colour I'm selecting. So if I let go, now it's the colour up there. So when I click on here, if that's the colour I want to put in my palette for later, now I can simply click on one of the boxes and I've saved it for later. If I want to select a different colour, so it might be that green, I hold it down. Oops, try again. You can see now I've accidentally made a mark, so if I want to undo that, you need to be very careful actually. And you can adjust the amount of time it requires you to hold down to select a colour this way. So I'll do it again. There you can see now it's selected the green. Again, when I let go, you can see it's selected up there. I want to put it there, and you can build up, you know, all sorts of different colours. You can do it quite quickly. I'm just snapping to different colours here just for the demonstration purposes, but it might be that that's the particular colour palette that suits you. And it will have saved it, so whenever you want to go back to that kind of colour scheme in the future, it will be there in your list. I'll just show you in the settings here. So there is an eyedropper delay now. I've set it to actually require quite a long press on the screen, but if I reduce it down, it might be more useful for yourself just to hold it, and you'll see it doesn't take very much time now to select that colour. So try it again. Doesn't take very long. Again, doesn't take very long, and then I might want to drop it there. Okay, so it is something that is adjustable in the settings there. Another really useful tool sometimes is the equivalent of like a paint bucket. If you're familiar with Photoshop, you'll know the paint bucket tool. This is quite similar. If you hold your finger down on the colour, you can now drag it across the area you want to put in there, drop it in. If you want to then control how much of that area it fills, oops, I meant to do that again, I'll let go, and that's the problem. So if I drop it in there and keep my finger held down and I slide it across, you'll see that it changes the amount of the image that it actually fills in. It's not a perfect paint bucket at times. You can see that it's quite patchy, but if you do that at an early stage where you've not got too much texture or too much information and just a line, then that could be a really useful tool for yourself. Okay, so for this part of the video I'm going to show you some of the different things that you can do with the settings and the tools on the other side. So I've opened one of my images just so you can see the kind of real world effects of some of these changes. So it is an image I have many different layers on, not to the full capacity. I think on this size you can have, you know, sort of 90 layers that you could work on. I do have a fair few, but I don't have anything close to 90 layers. But it is useful what I'm about to show you to actually show you how I would achieve those things on a real working image that actually has a few different layers on it. So if you've created something on the canvas and you know that you want to change it in some way, it could be you want to rotate it or change the scale or distort it, that is something you can do quite easily. So only the layers where the dots are actually lit up are active layers. Anything that's, you know, grayed out, blacked out is not a layer that you can see at the moment. So if I select a layer, perhaps where it's got some information that you can visibly see, if I move the canvas over here so you can see it more clearly, there is a layer here, and if I remove it, you'll see the change of what's just disappeared at the top there. So I've duplicated this image so that any changes don't accidentally save them and don't ruin my image. I've selected the layer, you can see it's turned blue. If I go up to the top here, I'm going to start with this tool. Now you can see that it's selected all the information on that layer. If I was to select an image, or rather a different layer, and use that same tool, you might find that it only requires a smaller box because you know, it's not as much information on that layer. So I've just moved it there, I didn't mean to. If I just undo that and tap on the screen, oops, undo it again. If you want to deselect that, press it again. I'll try it again. So I'm going to, in fact, no, I'll stick with that one. I'll stick with that layer now I've started with it. So you can see the box that it's put around it. I'll zoom in again so you can see the box. If I want to move that particular shape to a different area on the canvas, I can simply tap it and move it around, push it around anywhere I want it to be. Another thing I can do is to, inside the box, pinch in and out to change the scale. You can see here I'm rotating it too. If you wanted to pull it by one of the corners, you can do it with perhaps, you know, a bit more precision than pinching in and out. If I move it on the side, I can stretch it. Another thing that might be really useful is if you press and hold on that corner, you can now see that it distorts from that side. Okay, so you can distort the box and therefore the shape in all sorts of different ways. And that's certainly useful if you have a shape that you want to create a sense of perspective and it disappearing into the distance. Once you have an area selected like this, I just draw your attention down to the row of symbols that are at the bottom of the screen now. So if you wanted to undo everything you've just done, you can press the cross. Or if you just wanted to undo the last action, you can do that and redo it as well. Another option here is to rotate it. I'll just undo all the changes that I've made to it so you can see the degree to which it rotates. Now it does it in, I believe it's 45-degree turns at a time, and it's all clockwise. So you can keep doing it, it'll put it back in the original position. Another thing you can do is flip it. So I might want to flip it on the horizontal axis like that, and I might want to flip it on the vertical axis like that. So there's all sorts of different things that you can do on this bottom row of icons there, which can be really useful. Okay, the next setting is, you can see a tool here, it's like an S shape. It is actually a way of selecting a particular area and maybe moving just the information that's in there. Now, if I just go back and show you that again, in fact, I might select a different area that's got more information on it. So if I go to perhaps something that's a bit more substantial down here, if I zoom out, I use that tool to maybe draw around a particular area. Now, obviously, if you've got a stylus, you'll be able to see a bit more clearly than a kind of fat finger. Now, it's not fully selected that shape until it rejoins. Now you can see when I click the dot, it's fully closed that selection, and now it's possible to move it around. Okay, so now I've fully selected it, I can now go back to that tool, and it's only going to move that particular shape. Again, all of the same functions all the same things that I did previously are available here. So I can rotate it, I can flip it, I can flip it a different way, or I can put it back where it belongs. If I want to stop manipulating it in those ways, I can simply press those buttons and it will deselect. Another thing you can do if you select a particular area, if you want to select the opposite of that, you can simply tap on these buttons and you can see that it's selected either the positive or the negative. So by flipping between the two there, and whether you can see this clearly enough, but you can see the lines on the area, the background that I haven't selected. But if you flip it through with this button, it's now selected everything that's in the background. So if I click on here, I want to move everything that's in the background, I can change just the backgrounds, which is, you know, it might be that you want to use that on occasion. So let's just say I move the whole of the background over here. It's not something I would do for this particular piece, but you might do. So I'll deselect everything and then I'll zoom back out and you can see, you know, it's a crazy effect now because all the different layers are still showing, but that one particular background layer now has disappeared. So it looks very odd, very disjointed. Okay, because I haven't closed the image, I haven't gone back to the gallery, everything I've just done can be undone. So it might be a bit annoying to, you'll see it swaps between the side axis there and the bottom. Okay, so anyway, it's gone back to the stage before I manipulated the image and I've got the full image back now. If I want to select a layer to change, so it might be that I want to change only, let's have a look, I'll change that layer this time. So if I want to go onto this one, I can change all sorts of things here. So we've got the layer opacity, so if I click on that, and you'll see the slider when I move my hand across. So if I try and do this with this hand and point to where the change is actually taking place, or zoom into it, you can see as I slide along here, everything on that layer disappears or goes back. Okay, really useful. And it's really useful to have it in layers because you might decide to turn it down, work on a different layer, go back to it, and you can still go back into that, change the opacity, and it saves. So it's not a permanent change really, so you can experiment. It's not going to ruin your picture. You can also do some kind of blur on it. I mean, if you want to blur it out of existence, then you can do, or if you just want to add a little bit of blur. Very useful for creating a sense of things being, you know, kind of closer to camera or really far away. Motion blur. So it just creates this sense that obviously, you know, there's movement there. So it might be there's a wind in this particular image blowing them around and creates a bit of a motion blur. It might be that you've got a speeding vehicle in your image and you want to create a sense of motion. Perspective blur. I'll choose a different layer for this one. Let's see if it, you know, obviously it depends on the image as to how appropriate it is to use these different tools, but if I create perspective blur for this one, so I can create a sense of where I want the perspective to be, like the vanishing point, and then I can use the slider to move it around. Now you can see that some things are going to remain in focus there on a different layer. So in fact, to show you that more accurately, what I could do, because I have got a whole version of the image as a layer that I did place on the top. So if I wanted to affect the entire image with that effect, so if I pick the layer there and want to create a vanishing point on my perspective blur up here, and then move the slider along, you can see that it, you know, it kind of blurs it according to that point there really. It might be really useful if you want to create a sense of dynamic kind of movement, speeding through a tunnel perhaps. in which, obviously that's going to be the end of the tunnel, so everything sort of blurs from that point. Could be really useful. Something I've not used myself as of yet, but in time maybe I will. Okay, so the next thing might be sharpen. Now if I zoom in here, you may be able to see the effect of that a little bit more clearly. It's a very subtle effect, so maybe if I just zoom into this particular detail, you can maybe see that it does sharpen it, and you notice it on this particular area of this image there. So if I undo that now, you'll see the effect. It's not, I guess with sharpen you don't want to change the image, you just want to make it a little bit more crystal clear, so might be useful for certain areas of your image. Another option here is noise. So if you zoom in again and I move the slider, you'll see that it's created like a TV kind of texture, kind of noise grain. Again, something not something I would choose to use, but it might be really useful for some people. Now if you go down here, you've got hue, saturation and brightness. So you've got different sliders. You can change the whole kind of color tone of the entire piece. So if I zoom back out, so if I undo that actually, zoom back out, let's have a look at the effect of that on the whole image. So you can change the entire image there. You can choose the saturation, so it makes it a really vivid version of that colour, or you can turn that completely down, so you get a kind of black and white version, or you can change the kind of darkness of the whole image too. If you decide you don't want to do any of those things and undo everything, you can simply press the cross and it will revert back to your original image unspoiled. Colour balance, again, if you're working on a particular layer, for example, so we'll get rid of that, we'll make it invisible. I'll go back to this layer, which is this top detail. If you wanted to change the colour balance of that area, you can make it so it has more reds in it. I'm not sure that shows very clearly on there. Again, it depends on your image. I mean, sometimes your image is not going to be the kind of image that, is going to benefit from some of these functions. So I'll try it on the different layer. So if we go on colour balance, I make the red stand out more, you can see the effect now. Or I'll make it more blue. Or you can see here more towards the greens, or more towards the blues there, more towards yellows. I don't like any of those effects, so I'm going to cancel that and deselect the tool up there again. Now same with curves. Now I couldn't give you a precise description about what adjusting the curve does. Sometimes you just need to experiment, and it might be that you're just not quite happy. I mean, with the overall balance of light and dark, and just by tweaking the line here, you might just achieve something that you actually prefer. I'm going to undo it there and just even experiment with it now. I do actually kind of prefer the darker version there. Having said that, I tend to err on the side of having things a bit lighter, because you don't always know, especially with a digital image, how people are going to be viewing it. So someone might view it on a very sort of dark monitor, and then if you make it too dark to begin with, they're not going to see it as it should be seen. So I tend to err on the side of being slightly too light, though actually looking at this now I think I prefer it like that, but anyway. And then within the you've got a recolor option. Now it gives you a point at which you want to adjust something. Now you can see the little pink colour hopefully there that's changing. That's because I've got a pink up here selected in my colour palette, so I can move that. There's a kind of cross site there that I can move to any area of the picture that I want to change to that colour, and by pinching moving the slider up and down, you can see you can adjust, it sort of spans out from that cross really, and you can keep adjusting it like that. So that might be a really useful function too, but I'm going to undo the effect of that because I don't want that to be on this picture. Okay, so that accounts for all the different adjustments that you can do. I'm going to move to the kind of wrench, the kind of settings, the spanner symbol there. Now there's quite a lot to deal with within this section, so I'm going to try and whiz through most of this, and then I'll move on to explaining the Apple Pencil a little bit. Okay, the final symbol on this side is the kind of wrench or the spanner symbol. So you can see within this section there's quite a few extra symbols within that category. So got different actions here. I'll start with the easiest one. You've got help there, so if you want to ask questions or approach customer support, then that just takes you to the links. So I'll not do that one. preferences here. You've got some basic things that you can change about the apps. I prefer it with a dark background and a dark banner, but if you want to change it to a light background because you prefer that, then that's what you can do. I do think that that's not such a good idea for battery economy, really. I think that that will, obviously because it's requiring more of the backlight, I think that will drain the battery too quickly, so I don't like that. The next one, it doesn't seem to do a great deal. All it does is basically it sets the canvas at the start when you begin and open the image, and it sets it within the frame. If you don't have it set there, then it will push it all the way to the outside there, but it's not a big deal. I do find the next one quite useful because sometimes you might start an image like this, and then later on you decide that actually you prefer it this way around. So canvas memory is quite a good thing. If you don't have it, it will always be orientated to the way that you started the image. So if you go back out into the gallery and go back in, it will always reset to this way around. So I'll give you an example of that. Because it has the canvas orientation memory on, so if I click back out of it, you'll see now it's adjusted to having been turned on its side, which I actually think is really useful, because sometimes, like I say, you change your mind about which way around you want it to be. So wait for it to go back, I'll adjust it back, go back into the settings. Brush cursor. Now, I've been using it on, but actually I changed that earlier and I don't tend to use that very often. I'll turn it up so you can see it clearly. If you'll notice around my finger there's a circle there, I've let go, but you'll notice there's a white ring, that is the cursor, and it shows you where it's going to impact on there. It might be useful, but I'll show you what it looks like without it. So without it, all you're doing is you're just getting the effect without the white ring showing up. Okay, so I'll just undo those things before I spoils the image. The right hand interface is these symbols here, so if you change it to left hand interface, it's now all going to shift to this side. Okay, so you notice the sliders are now on this side. So I guess that is whether you're left or right handed. It might make a difference in that respect, so I prefer it to the right hand interface. I'm right handed. I showed you this before, the classic colour picker, so that affects this section. So everything else is the same in terms of the palettes, but obviously your light and dark is adjusted here, your depth of colour is adjusted here, or you can have the different colours here. I think that the classic is perhaps better because it has some extra functions. If you remember, when I go back to the classic colour picker, you've got the sliders, so you can control, or you can specifically adjust the saturation and the light and dark tone. Okay, you'll notice on here it's got the auto hide interface disabled. As you see at the moment when I'm drawing, it doesn't disappear, it stays permanently on the screen, whereas if I put this on, when I start drawing, those symbols disappear. Now if I let go, they come back fairly quickly, but if I change the setting here, I can have it so there's a massive delay, and it's really quite annoying. I'm not going to do it now because you'll have to wait 2 or 3 seconds to demonstrate it, but in fact I'll just do it for the 3 seconds. So if I draw on the screen, it disappears, 1, 2, 3, yeah, roughly, and it comes back. I tend to prefer that being off. I don't like the things to disappear. They don't interfere massively with the amount of drawing space you have anyway, so that's not a problem. This is the eyedropper delay. So if you want to be able to hold your finger down on an area where you know you want that colour, like that, you can have it so that you don't have to hold it down very long, or if you adjust it here, so it takes longer, and I'll show you here, I have to hold it for longer, and now it's selected. So that's the adjustment for that. So I'm going to turn that down because I don't want to have to do that for too long. Another feature that perhaps I should have shown earlier, and a feature that I do actually use and I have used on this particular piece, is the quick line. So if I show you here, if you draw a curved line and you decide you want it to be straight, by holding your line down it snaps to a straight line. So I'll undo that. I'll show you again. So I'll try to get a straight line, but it's not perfect. So hold it and you see it snaps to a straight line. Now this is visible in areas like this, perhaps where I've created a more accurate straight line. Sometimes I don't bother with that, other times that I will rely upon it. But you can change the amount of time that you need to hold your finger down before it activates. So if you See, it took a little longer to do that. Okay. You've also got a selection mask visibility. So if you turn up to maximum and you select an area like this, and then you've selected it and you want to, you'll see that it's really quite strong. Okay. But if you wanted it to be quite faint, you could so I'll undo that, go into settings, turn that really quite low, and then I can select an area again that I want to work with. Make sure it's joined up, change the opposite, and you can barely see, I don't know whether you can even see on the video, but it's a really faint sort of lined, patched out area there. I don't want to do that. If we look at some of the other ones across the top, devices. Now, if you are using the Apple Pencil, it will automatically be active on this app. Having said that, if you're using a different stylus, then you will have to make sure that it's one of the ones that is here and it can actually sync and is compatible with the device. You can see that it's got the Wacom device and the Pogo Connect, and a Donut Jot and Pencil by 53 as well. I've got it selected to none because the Apple Pencil has priority and automatically will work. Share, so if you wanted to share your image, you can simply click on that, select the file format, and you can share it as a Photoshop file, so it will send it to Photoshop and all the layers will remain as layers and put it straight into a Photoshop layered document, which is really useful. Another thing you can do is to export it as a video. So if you click on this, you can see it's going to begin exporting it. It's going to be quite a large document and it takes just a few moments to actually create it as a file, and you can choose where to put it. You can save it, you can send it as a, well, you can potentially send it as an email, but it might be rather too big as a file, so anyway, I'm not going to do that. Canvas settings. I'll start at the bottom, so you canvas metadata. You can see here that you've got information like track time, so how much time it's taken to create the piece of work, the size of the video file, so you can see it's nearly 60 megabyte. The image size is 105 megabyte, and it gives you the canvas dimensions. Okay. You can choose to disable the video. Obviously, it's not something that everybody is going to want to use as a function, so you can disable it. I always want to recreate these and maybe turn them into YouTube videos later, so I always prefer to keep them as a video file. You've got instant replay now. That's a new function, so you can start right at the beginning, and you can see here, because I've pressed it, it's starting to go through the video now. You have a slider at the top, so just like with the other functions, if you move your finger across and slide it across, it goes through really fast, or you can go backwards. But a really cool feature within this is you can zoom into a particular area and watch as that area evolves as well. So when you're done, click at the top, done, and it reverts back. Copy canvas to clipboard is a bit like copy and paste. You can flip the whole canvas now. I will use this sometimes to just get a sense of whether the whole thing is working. So rather than flipping only details or particular layers, it controls the whole canvas, so you can flip it vertically and it will turn upside down, turn it back again, or turn it horizontally. This is the one I tend to do the most, just a bit like looking at something in the mirror. You see it perhaps in a different way, and it just, you know, gives you a better indication about light and size and perspective and overall composition as well. Okay, I'm going to do a separate little section on perspective guide. I'll do that in a few moments. But if you look at here, in the insert, you can insert an image, so you can import from your photos, or you can take a photo which will access the camera. So I'm not going to do that now, but you understand the principle of that. Okay, I'm just going to talk briefly about finger gestures. There's a few different things that are really useful that you can do with your fingers on the iPad. Obviously you can draw and you can do all the options there at the top, but you can also do things like the quick line. So if you hold down your finger, it will snap to a straight line. You'll probably notice there that after I've made a mark, I use two fingers, so tap them both on the screen at the same time and it will undo that. If I want to redo that, I'll use three fingers, tap them down, and it removes and it puts them back. So it's an undo and a redo function essentially. You can obviously zoom in and out of your image, you can rotate your image, but it is also possible to completely adjust permanently what you want your fingers to do on the screen. And it might be that if you use a stylus, you don't want your fingers to do anything at all. So I'll just show you. If I come out of the app and I go into settings, and I'll move down the apps that I've got, and I'll go into Procreate. If you look down here onto finger mode, now it's got it onto selected tool. That means that within the app, if I've got it to selected to be a brush or an eraser, then that's what it's going to do. I could set it so that it will only do paint, or only do smudge, or only erase. It's also possible to have your fingers only do things like the pinch in and out to zoom in and out, or to the rotate. Now that's something that I would use if I'm using the Apple Pencil, and it almost eliminates the need for palm rejection, because your hands simply don't do anything on the screen anyway, or your fingers don't. So this is only something you're going to change and adjust if you are using a stylus at the same time. So whilst I'm here, I may as well put it to gesture only, because in a moment I'm going to be explaining how to use the Apple Pencil with the iPad Pro and Procreate, and I do always now use the gestures only. So this is the section of the video where I'm going to explain how to use the Apple Pencil in conjunction with Procreate. Now it obviously works in lots of different programs. This is the program that I'm used to using it in, so I'm going to explain how it works within this app. So as I explained earlier, I've got it so that my fingers now will not make a single mark, and now this puts it truly like a pencil and paper. So my fingers don't draw, they don't smudge, I can't do anything now with my finger. I can pinch in and out, so I can zoom in and out with it, I can rotate. I've still got the gestures, so that if I want to make a mark, oops, I'm going to put it on drawing. So if I make a mark, I can now double tap to undo it, 3-finger tap to redo. So it does all the functions that I've explained earlier, but to actually make marks and to use any of these tools now, it's the Apple Pencil that will only do those things. So as you could probably see there, I can control, just like I can when I'm normally drawing, I can control the size of the brush and the opacity, and I can draw straight on the screen. Now you'll notice the pressure sensitivity there. So if I go onto the particular brush type that I'm using, and I go onto the pencil settings here, I can actually change some of the settings here. So I can have it so that on pressure, so the more I press with the pencil, the opacity will change. Now I'll just give you a quick demonstration of that. So if I press on lightly there and gradually increase the pressure, and you can see a gradual sort of transition between light and dark. I can undo all of those things. If I go back onto here, so I can have it the opposite. So if I press on hard, you see rather than a positive impact, it will have a negative impact. So if I press lightly, it's dark, and I press harder, it gets lighter, and I press completely and it's disappeared. I can't think of many reasons why I'd want to do that, but it's an option. So if you don't want it to affect, you put it bang in the middle. I do like it to affect it, so I'll put it quite high. Another thing you can do with the app is to affect the size of the mark with pressure. So as well as opacity, you can have it changing in size depending on pressure. You can also change the softness. Now, one of the other functions of the Apple Pencil is that you can tilt it. So you can see it's got quite an active area there. So if I change some of the tilt options, so if I now draw like this, you can see the effect, and if I draw like that, you can see it has a darker mark, makes a darker mark when I'm actually tilting it. Okay. And you can also have the size affected by the tilt as well. So I'm going to turn the softness down because I suspect that's impacting on things. If I now turn it to the side, you can see you get a much darker mark, and if I return it upright, I'll get a much fainter mark and a thinner mark as well. So you can adjust all sorts of different ways. So I'm going to change it so the opacity doesn't change with the tilt. So there you go. You get a narrow mark, and if you turn it to the side, there you get a darker mark. So perhaps if I just undo all of those things, and we'll change it to something maybe that would be more useful, like a graphite. So you can see there a little bit large actually, so I'll turn that right down. So pressing on lightly, it's hardly doing anything. Pressing on hard, you get a much more dramatic. Doing it upright, you'll see there is different than when I tilt it, you get a much broader mark. Okay, so you know, different ways of using it could be really useful for yourself. Okay, a new addition to Procreate is the perspective guide. Now, I have purchased it. I don't know at what point they are going to make it freely available, but there is an early bird access in which you have to pay us, a pound or two or a couple of dollars to actually get early access to the perspective guide. If I activate it here and then click Edit Perspective Guide, it's going to, when I can zoom in and out of this, I can select a vanishing point, and you probably see all the guides, lines, and all the really interesting lines there put in automatically for you. Now if I want to create a second perspective there, you'll notice that it's instantly clicked in. Now it's really useful, it does it as two separate colours so you can tell the difference between the two. I can then, if I wanted to create a really far off third perspective, I can do so way off the canvas up there. Okay, now that's useful as a perspective guide because you can then use this to, if I click done, you can use this to draw certain shapes. So if I just select an appropriate tool, so you can use the guide. Now I'm doing it very thick lines just to make it really visible. Okay, I'm not going to go into creating a good work of art with this. I'm just trying to demonstrate the principle of the tools really. So, if you want to stick to the lines, I mean, sometimes the lines are not going to be exactly on the point at which you want to create an edge, but that's why they're a guide. They're not going to be exactly where you want them to be, but they are going to be a rough guide for yourself. So you see you've got the perspective there where it vanishes over here, the perspective where it vanishes over there, and a perspective where it vanishes up at the top. And it probably would have made more sense actually. So if I get rid of all of that information, and I can, if you'll notice now, if I go back to this, I can press on the points there on the perspective, and I can delete that particular point. If I want to place it down here instead, I add it to there, and then I can click done, and then I can use this one instead. So if I'm going to select a different tool because I don't like that. Go onto the HB, so I can now select, or use the guide rather, to help me create a different shape. So again, it vanishes towards this line, it vanishes towards this vanishing point, but there's also one that will be way down here and it vanishes towards that point as well. So it's almost like you've got a perspective down there. I suppose on some pictures the vanishing point would be quite subtle, so it is really useful to be able to place a vanishing point really far away, because the nearer it is to the object, the more extreme the vanishing point is going to be. So some drawings will only require 2 vanishing points because the third impact on the shape is going to be so subtle you don't really want it to be there really. You can give quite a kind of exaggerated, over the top look to things if you're not careful. So if I go back onto the perspective guide and edit it again, you'll notice some functions down here. Now if I move this slider down, you'll see that the impact of the vanishing lines gets fainter, so you can have it really dark so it's dead visible. If that's going to be too distracting and annoying, you can turn it down here. And this line, and whether you can see this very clearly, zoom in you will. If I change this slider, I'll do it with my finger. If I use this slider, it actually makes the lines very thin. If I slide it this way, it makes the lines that bit thicker. So you can have them very thick so that when you zoom out you can still see them, or you can have them very dark and very thick so you can see them very, very easily. Now you notice when I zoom out, the strength of the line doesn't change. Okay, so when you zoom in, it still appears at the same thickness no matter where you zoom in and out of it. So it always stays at the same thickness no matter how much you zoom in and out. So you change the settings, however it works for you is obviously the best way to use it. Anyway, I do hope you found this video useful. If you can think of any other features, perhaps you could leave suggestions for other viewers down in the comments, or any questions, so perhaps I can get around to answering those for you if I can figure out the answers. Please take a look at my other videos. I do lots of drawing demos, painting demos, and any support and views appreciation is much appreciated. Thank you very much.